Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to a special edition of The Stench of Truth. And tonight's guest is going to be Adam Gorightly. Some of you may be familiar with him. I put in the description box for the episode a couple of books that he has written, namely autobiography of Carrie Thornley, who is a very bizarre individual, or was a very bizarre individual in the 20th century, having links to the JFK assassination, Discordianism, and a whole host of other counterculture type things. Also, I just finished reading a little book that he put out on James Shelby Downard, another very fascinating individual, and someone that I have a great interest in. There are a couple things in that book that I would like to talk with Adam about. And he is also the author of The Shadow over Santa Susanna, Black Magic, Mind Control, and the Manson Family Mythos. All about the weirdness surrounding the Manson family and the infamous murders that they were involved in. So I hope everybody enjoys the conversation. I imagine we're going to be going all over the map today. I did want to start out with James Shelby Downard, but we'll find out exactly what's going on with Adam, what he's up to, and I can also recommend to you, if you'd like to download podcasts, check out his Untamed Dimensions. Most of the links should be in the description box, but I will make sure you have them if you don't. So, anyway, let's see if he's on the line here, and I'll bring him right up. Is that you, Adam?
Good.
Adam.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
It looks good.
How are you?
Great. Thanks for having me on.
Well, I can't tell you how pleased I am to have you on, because you are a very interesting character yourself, not to mention all of the fascinating people that you look into yourself. Carrie Thornley, James Shelby Downard, the Manson family, doing podcasting yourself. You're a very interesting individual, and I'm very pleased to have you on the show, so welcome. And I want to give you a chance to tell us a little bit about yourself right now, and how you got into doing what you're doing and that sort of thing. The usual introductory stuff.
How I got into doing what I'm doing.
Yeah, like how did you get interested in some of the more obscure and esoteric ideas that you research?
I think it was a combination of having some anomalous experiences, and that kind of set me on the path in the late 70s. Had a psychedelic UFO experience, and around that period I was in my late teens. I had astral projection experiences and other odd things, so that got me wondering, what exactly is going on, and I started researching these topics as well as conspiracies, and here I am.
Well, it sounds, barring the psychedelic experiences, which I've never experienced anything like you describe your bizarre UFO witnessing event, but I've had a couple of experiences with mushrooms, but I never had any kind of real psychedelic imagery going along with them. Instead, what I got out of it was sort of this profound sense that the universe is kind of unending, and that there is like a thing behind everything that there is, and the closer you look at it, the more like deeper it gets. It was like a very philosophical kind of thing for me in that regard.
Sure, and I had those kind of trips back in the day. The early acid trips was basically what you're talking about, and also a sense of oneness of the universe. That's why that all things are related. Some people, relate psychedelic experiences to getting at God or the God force.
Yeah, exactly, and that's where a lot of what it seems to me that the longer you're doing this sort of thing, and I've been researching this stuff and been involved with it and reading about it for so long now, that it seems to me that it puts you on a track that ultimately leads you to the conclusion that there is really sort of just only one thing. Basically, like everything leads like to a singularity almost.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, do you get that sense yourself?
Sure, that's where all the synchronicities come in. You've wondered, is everything really all connected? And that's what a lot of the research in quantum physics seems to be pointing at, that we are connected in one way or another.
Yes, and I definitely embrace that idea, although if you asked me to try to explain quantum physics, I'd be hard-pressed to come up with just about anything.
Don't ask me.
But in the popular press, I mean, what's come out about it certainly points to that direction. That we have a multiplicity of dimensions, and all possibilities are real somewhere, and all this sort of thing. It kind of makes the idea of conspiracy and the weirdness and the arcane and the kind of stuff that it seems both you and I are interested in, and many other people as well. That's sort of like a what would you call it? A symptom of that reality, more so than it is like a something on the fringe. It really is like what's central to reality instead of what's on the edges. If that makes sense.
Part of it's that psychedelic sensibility for people who came of age at a certain time, and was also, reading Philip K. had the experiences I had where I was basically seemed like I was able to peek into and open doors to other dimensions and things, and alternate realities. You see the possibilities of that with psychedelics and reading Philip K. Dick and doing those type of things.
Yeah, I'll tell you, Philip K. Dick is he's an entire thing all to himself there. With Valis and the strange experience he had with the pink laser beams, fish symbolism, and the black iron prison. And I think the black iron prison is probably the thing that sticks with me the most about Philip K. Dick, because it seems more and more like the world we're living in right now is a giant black iron prison.
Yeah, it's becoming more visible each day.
Yeah, and it's a shame.
He caught glimpses of it, and I think it's.
I think it made him crazy. I think it was something that he couldn't handle personally. I mean, considering the mental ravages that he went through over time, it seems to me that whatever was directed his way or whatever happened to notice him was a little bit too much for him. But I guess we all owe him a debt of gratitude for being able to write about that stuff, at least so that other people could look at it and kind of dissect it and try to come to terms with it themselves.
To stick his neck out there, and basically he was talking about the Matrix long ago. Many
yeah,
years before
absolutely.
the movie, people started tossing around these ideas. He was onto it with all his great books. You talked about the Valis series, but he wrote over. Good heavens, I have most of the books. I forget the exact number now, but 45, 46 fiction books during the course of his career, and also a handful of nonfiction books, many of them which were published after he died.
Yeah, I think I remember hearing you in a podcast. I can't remember where, because I've listened to a lot of your interviews. Probably listened to every episode of Untamed Dimensions at least once. But I remember you talking about having a sort of one-upsmanship with someone about the number of Philip K. Dick books they have in their collection. You recall that?
It was a little friendly competition started by a guy named Groucho Gandhi, who has a website. I guess if you go to, I believe it's www.grouchogandhi.com, and he posted a photo of his Dick collection, and it was like, who has the biggest dick, And
that's what it was. I couldn't remember the exact terminology, but yeah.
And so mine was larger, actually. I think it came out like at 46 inches, and his was less than that. So I took a photo, and we started a competition, and other people got involved who had longer, So, yeah, it was kind of a fun thing to do.
Yeah, I remember you talking about that. I don't have that many of his books, but I mean, at least in my library right now, but I've read several of them. I saw something not too long ago that The Man in the High Castle was supposed to be made into a motion picture, and I haven't heard anything more about it. But do you know anything about that?
I think I just heard a rumor of that too, but I haven't heard anything else.
Yeah,
that would make a great movie.
Oh, I believe so. Yeah, an alternate reality like that. That's a fascinating idea. Well, anyway, I wanted to. Since I just finished reading your little book on James Shelby Downard, I wonder if you could give us like a brief synopsis of who he was, and then maybe we can go into some concepts that are brought up in the book. And there are a couple questions that I want to ask you specifically about things that you wrote, and so give us a little background on who James Shelby Downard was, if you would.
Well, I first learned of Downard through his essay he co-wrote with Michael Anthony Hoffman called King Kill 33, which put forth the theory that the Kennedy assassinations and a lot of different alchemical workings at the behest of the Freemasons were done along the 33rd degree latitude. Like I said, the Kennedy assassination happened in Daley Plaza, which is on the 33rd latitude, as well as if you follow the line out across the country, it'll take you from like the West Coast, Disneyland, which has some Freemasonic associations, across New Mexico and Alamogordo, where they fired off the first nuclear tests, bomb blasts, and so there's a lot of oddities that go along that 33rd latitude. And anyway, that was the thesis of that book, or actually essay, King Kill 33. So I became interested in Downard, wanted to learn more about him. And you still hearing me okay, Ted?
Oh, yeah, you're fine.
Okay. And so I started looking into the background of Downard, and read all the books on him. His output really wasn't that much. There was a handful of essays, and really the first mention of Downard in kind of popular literature was in Robert Anton, before Robert Anton Wilson's Trigger, and Jim Brandon's America, where he was talking about these theories revolving around the Kennedy assassination on the 33rd latitude. He didn't name Downard in that book, but not long afterwards, it was like in the mid-'70s, Jim Brandon put out a audio cassette series called Sirius Rising, where he interviewed Downard, all the strangeness surrounding the contacts with beings from Sirius, and that somehow there was like some conspiracy they were directing here on Earth. And this kind of mythology has evolved over the years. There's a lot. Philip K. Dick, for one, believed he had been contacted from certain entities from Sirius. So there was a legend about James Shelby Downard, and apparently Michael Anthony Hoffman and Jim Brandon finally met up with him in like the late 70s, and he was kind of a reclusive character, older Southerner who traveled around the country in towing his Airstream trailer and keeping a Colt 45 at his side because he believed the Freemasons were after him, and he was also a researcher into Fortean phenomenon, these type of things. Now, a lot of people over the years claim that he's such a larger-than-life character that he was a literary creation, and so I started looking into those theories, and the evidence at first seemed to point that perhaps he was, that the likes of Michael Anthony Hoffman and Jim Brandon and later Adam Parfrey kind of created Downard basically, as a literary vehicle. But the more evidence I came across, it became obvious after a while that Downard was a real flesh and blood human being who died about a decade ago.
Well, of course, I read I read the book The Carnivals of Life and Death, which was sort of like autobiography of his younger years, as it were. Unfortunately, we don't have anything for his later life, at least that was produced by him. But I'm familiar with the idea that he was just an invention and someone that they could pin sort of these sort of wacky, obscure ideas onto. But in the Carnivals of Life and Death, he makes it clear, like right from the very beginning, that everything is sort of run by the Masons, that the Freemasons are sort of behind everything. And at least he had been chosen to be sort of like a sacrificial goat in a lot of their occult rituals and things like this. And one person...
Really...
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, he was really, if you believe the tall tales that come out of that book, he describes his early encounters with Freemasons, and his family were involved, and he was subjected to abuse at a very early age, 3-4 years old. But, that's kind of the same stories you hear from MK Ultra and Monarch survivors, and this was going on, kind of around the turn of the century, in the teens or so, last century, of course. And basically, he comes across, if his story is true, as one of the first mind control victims, at least of the modern age.
Yeah,
anyway.
in one particular part of the book, he talks about some sort of antenna system that was already set up. I forget exactly where. It might have been Louisiana, or I think it was in Louisiana, that was actually used for mind control purposes for factory workers or something like that. And this would have been like in the 20s. So yeah, it's really way out there. As far as that goes, to think.
Go ahead. He claimed that his wife, and he doesn't really, I don't believe he refers to her as his wife in the literature, but let's see, what did he call her? Basically, she's kind of like a whore of Babylon.
Yes.
Scarlet Woman for the intelligence agencies. I'm forgetting exactly what the moniker he used, but this was indeed his wife, and her name, I have learned, was Anne Whitweir. And, there's some leads like this you could follow, and he talks about that in the audio series, which has reappeared here in recent years, that Sirius Rising series that Jim Brandon, a.k.a. William Grimstad, put out. Michael Anthony Hoffman was offering that for a short period of time, and I was able to obtain the series, but part of the agreement with obtaining it is you can't share it with anyone. So.
Okay, well,
but it's fascinating hearing Downard speak on that audio cassette series. But anyway, this woman who was his wife, who was stolen from him, Anne Whitweir, and she became like this plaything of these spooks, these intelligence agents, Freemasons, Illuminati, whatever you want to call them, who are involved in OTO-type magical rituals, and they stole his wife from him and used her, and basically he discovered some type of telemetry device that he pulled out of her ass, I believe is the story.
Oh, really?
And this was in the 30s or so, and he talks about that in one of his essays. I can't remember the name of the essay. It's in the Secret and Suppressed anthology. But
yes.
he was saying these spooks were, were using some of this basically type of high-tech mind control devices way back then. And of course, that's what you always hear about the technology, is we don't really hear it about the technology until it's been in use for many, many years.
Yes, and I think it's sort of like a byword amongst people who investigate this sort of thing, that the technology that's in the public sphere is usually like decades behind that which is developed by the government and or in secret that we don't get to see. So I mean the basic premise is certainly plausible in one sense, but boy, it's really if any of those stories are true, it really is a frightening visage of what kind of like control grid that they're trying to set up. But I found a little thing here in your book where he does refer to her as the Great Whore.
That was it, yes.
Yeah, and her name was Whitweir, which I guess, that could be an interesting avenue to go down. And he described her as a Memphis belle who performed call to chaos rites from coast to coast in the good old USA and in some foreign countries too, including Haiti, with her Circean cup of licentiousness that contained an aphrodisiac and an abulic drug that in small doses produces transit loss of willpower and lacunar amnesia and or localized amnesia. In large doses, it can produce abulomania, whatever the hell that is, permanent loss of willpower and permanent amnesia. A person so poisoned is a zombie. So, it kind of surprises me because, a lot of times when you look at, bizarre characters like this, it surprises me that anybody would end up married to this person, because you can't imagine them really living a normal life. It seems like their entire, construct of a world around them is like their whole thing. Would they have anything left to contribute to a relationship, So it kind of makes you wonder if maybe she was just put there. But you could go down a real deep rabbit hole with Downard, that's for sure. But the other thing I wanted to... Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say I only scratched the surface with that book. That's why you referred to it as small, and indeed it is. It was one of those things that I was kind of working on for a number of years, and I set it aside, and there might have been a period where I didn't work on it for a year and a half, so it was kind of a slow process. But the deal was you could only find so much biographical information about Downard, so I kind of weaved in some of my own theories and ideas, and finally put something out. I think it's a decent book, but somebody could spend a lot more time and follow out some more leads and get into more, of Downard's background. It's just kind of difficult. He had a sister he lived with in Nashville, and she's probably quite old now too. So it's kind of so long in time, so much time has passed. It'd probably be a difficult chore at this point. But anyway.
Well, I wouldn't. I wouldn't take the comment, a little book as anything indicating a lack of scholarly work on your part, because the book is really, really good. And just because it's small doesn't mean it doesn't give you a lot of information. So,
it's
I wanted
definitely
to.
Not a complete.
Well, no, it's not. Yeah. But if anybody wanted to get that, they could read Carnals of Life and Death to get a further background on him, and then of course, if anybody wanted to do some additional research, that's certainly possible. But I really enjoyed the book. I thought it was really good. There are a couple of things that I wanted to bring up to you just to get your take on them, because they're just so bizarre and strange. Regarding Downard. And one is the several times in the Carnivals of Life and Death where he talks about being saved from imminent death by javelina pigs. And for the life of me, I can't figure out the pig reference and why and what the significance is of this. It's almost as like he's saying that the pigs represent some, opposing force, perhaps. And they're like, looking out for him as the sacrificial scapegoat for the Masonic occult rituals. I mean, it's really bizarre. In the one instance, he was like, I don't know, it was a firehouse, I think, and the guy there was threatening to throw him out back to let the pigs eat him. And I guess they were really nasty pigs, and they threw him out there. But he was able to make his way through the pen of the vicious pigs, and they didn't bother him at all. And there was another time where, go ahead.
He prevailed. He
always won.
Yeah.
He defeated every one of their nefarious schemes. That's that kind of like if there's anything that really you have to say kind of knocks it into the territory of being full blown. It's the idea that they never were able to get him in any of their sneak traps.
Yeah.
And unless he's just not telling us of the times when he failed, which I guess is possible. But the other thing was the story of Tom Mix, the real Tom Mix.
Remember
that
memory.
Particular story?
Refresh my memory.
Okay, well, I guess he would have been about 12 years old, and I forget where he was living at the time, but he was on his way home, I believe, but I guess he had a premonition that something was going to happen, or because of events leading up to it, he decided that it was a good idea to have some protection with him. So he fashioned a weapon out of a pipe and a shotgun shell, which he put in the end of the pipe, and he took it with him. And as he was crossing a bridge or something to that effect, he saw some masons forming up on the other side, so that they were kind of blocking his progress. So he tried to turn around, and some other masons were blocking the other end of the bridge. So he was kind of left on this bridge by himself. And I believe it was a blue roadster comes driving up very, very fast and practically out of control. And the crowds part for it, and it comes out on the bridge. And who should come out of the car but Tom Mix, the old actor, but the real Tom Mix. And that was Downard's contention that the guy that made the movies was actually a double. And the real Tom Mix was actually a strung-out heroin addict, and he had come at the behest of supposedly his Masonic controllers, I imagine, to finally take care of the thorn in the side of the Freemasons, James Shelby Downard. And it was instead the real Tom Mix, through the workings of his makeshift shotgun, who met his end there on that bridge.
Yeah, okay. I do remember that scene now. That book, Carnivals of Life and Death, and there's different versions of that. Michael Anthony Hoffman has a version that's a bit different from the Feral House version. The one Hoffman had available for a while is pretty crude as far as the writing style, not very literate a lot of the time. Some of Downard's original material is he wasn't a very good writer. That's why the likes of Michael Anthony Hoffman and other people basically took his theories, which were brilliant and out there, and made them readable. But I had even the Feral House edition. I had a lot of trouble getting through that. You read through a passage like the one you just mentioned with Tom Mix, and it's like, oh God, this is really hard to believe, to digest, to think that a little 5-year-old kid could prevail time and again against
yes,
a whole squadron of Freemasonic goons, and but perhaps there is a measure of truth to it, but also perhaps Downard got his brain messed up and confabulated some of the stories, but I do believe he was traumatized, and I believe he had some really deep and unique insights into the strange world we live in.
Oh, absolutely, and I couldn't agree more. I mean, obviously, just your commentary on his writing and it not being very good, it sort of points to disorganized thought and that sort of thing. So, it's very easy to believe that Downard might just have been crazy. I mean, but the fact of the matter is that some of the things that he proposes, like in the King Kill 33, which I'm also familiar with that, certainly, there are some stretches in there, but a lot of it is pretty interesting, and it does take a totally different spin on Kennedy assassination from what what you would call more mainstream conspiracy writers would even dare go in that direction, I would imagine.
I've discovered I think there is definitely conspiracies all around us at different levels, and a lot of the mind control conspiracies, I think there's something to those, and there was definitely a conspiracy in the JFK and RFK, MLK, all those assassinations. But I also like to step back and look at conspiracies conspiracy theories sometimes from a anthropological point of view, just how these evolve with different people. Even some of the more far out theories I don't necessarily believe in or discount, but it's just interesting to look at somebody like Downard, or another guy I've written a bit about named Jeffrey Dean Turner, who believes that Tuesday Weld was an Illuminati high priestess, and just kind of examine how these type of theories evolve. And also it seems like at the core of a lot of them there's something there. They were able to pick up on something that had a measure of truth to it, but that doesn't mean their complete theory is totally right.
Yeah, and that often, and I'm sure it's kind of cliched and hackneyed to say so, but oftentimes I think it is nonetheless true. A lot of times when you get trite expressions, they're true. That's why they're trite. And that is that sometimes the paranoid mindset and or people who are a little off have deeper insights into what's really going on than other people, because they can see things that quote unquote normal people can't.
Yeah, as Charles Manson said, and Kerry Thornley quoted him, paranoia is a higher form of awareness.
Yes, absolutely, and on a certain level, that's absolutely true. I can't disagree.
I also wanted to note that some of the more far out conspiracy theories, I think it's important to at least take the time and consider them possible, or to entertain these theories, because it's a way of really expanding your consciousness, stretching your brain.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely, yeah. Yes. Because the ultimate thing is, a lot of times I think people they become so set in their minds that they're unable to even grasp other concepts. And a lot of times I find this with people who are embroiled in a particular religious dogma, that dominates their mindset, and they can't even conceive of anything outside of the realm of their particular dogmatic beliefs. And I'm not trying to come down on religion per se, but that's just one example of what I'm talking about. I think
you could.
Yeah, go ahead.
You could make the same observation with the field of UFO research. Some of the people in the field who are tied to the ET hypothesis, basically, that there's some pretty rigid thinking going on, and when there's 101 explanations of what UFOs and these visitors, whatever they are, could be. But you see that same type of religious thinking you see in organized religions with certain sectors in UFO research.
Oh, I couldn't agree more, especially with people who are convinced that we're being visited by, physical aliens and physical ships. A lot of the proponents of that particular point of view just absolutely will not entertain any other possibility for what these things are, and I think it's a broader, deeper subject. Thankfully, we have a few people who are level-headed enough to look at it from a broader perspective than just being locked in one particular point of view. A good guy for that is Nick Redfern, who I'm sure you're familiar with.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good.
He's a great guy.
Yeah.
Are you a good friend of his?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. Well,
actually,
I'll tell you what. He's a great guy.
Yeah.
Go ahead. You were going to say something else there.
Oh, I was just going to say I saw him a couple weeks ago.
Well, I contacted him to come on the show, and he agreed. It's just a matter of setting up a time, schedule-wise, because he said he was on the road right now. And I'd be very happy to talk to him, too, because I've enjoyed his work. So yeah, it's people like that bring a measure of sanity to an otherwise, like, totally controlled field, like ufology, you know. So I just wanted to throw that out there anyway. But let's get back. I wanted to touch on something that you had in Downard's book that didn't really have anything to do with James Shelby Downard per se, and that was the I'm pretty sure you had it in here. It was or no, maybe it wasn't. I think it was not in Downard's book. Anyway, I think it was one of your rants on your website. That's what it was. So let's change the subject a little bit and talk about. I think it was on your website. Let's see if I can find it. Yeah, the review of Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut. And in leading up to this, I wanted to ask you if you had ever seen that brilliant documentary that somebody came out with, and I don't know who it was, but I saw it online probably about a year ago or so, where they got all kinds of, bigwigs in it, and they talked about how they faked the moon landing, with Kubrick being the guy in charge of the whole project. And I was wondering if you ever saw that. I can't remember the name of it right now, but I know they had, like, Rumsfeld was in it, several other people from, different administrations talking about, and I don't even know how, maybe they just used clips that they had talking about something similar or whatever, or if they actually got those people to agree to be in that documentary. But it was really brilliantly done. A total hoax, supposedly, of course, but it was very interesting. And, and then looking at Kubrick a little bit more, especially after Eyes Wide Shut and seeing that movie and, realizing the connections that are there to so many other different avenues of thought, made me look at Kubrick a little bit more closely, and apparently a lot of other people have been doing that as well, because I saw another presentation that somebody put together online about Kubrick, and how The Shining was actually like his revealing of the fake Apollo landings, and they used selected clips from the movie as evidence of him revealing things about it. And of course, this all leads up to the idea that Kubrick was offed because he was on the verge of spilling the beans or something to this effect. So with that little lead in, perhaps you can tell us a little bit about Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut and your review there that you put up on your website.
Yeah, first off, you mentioned this movie about the Apollo landing being a hoax. I haven't seen that. I've heard the rumors, the conspiracy theories that he was actually the one who directed and filmed the hoax, if there was a hoax. But yeah, that movie sounds intriguing you're talking about. I'll have to search it out. No, you weren't wrong. You were probably just a little confused because that review of Eyes Wide Shut, it's on my website, but I also did weave it into the Downard book as well, just because it seemed like I made a lot of this type of connections that James Shelby Downard would, in my review of Eyes Wide Shut. I think that review forget the year Eyes Wide Shut came out. It was in the late 90s, probably 97, 98. Is that correct?
I'm not sure. That sounds about right to me.
And sometimes I have the kind of knack for picking up on stuff kind of being on the cutting edge sometimes, I think. And a lot of the stuff I picked up in that movie, I think I was one of the first people to write about it, and other people as well. The late
1999. 1999,
okay.
By the way. There you go.
Yeah. And
okay,
so
continue.
Basically the review, and I've, over the years, that review is a good 11 or 12 years old. I've probably forgotten half of what I wrote about, but mainly the stuff I wrote about in that had to do with, it seemed like things I saw in the movie that reminded me of accounts I'd read about monarch mind control programming and allusions to different things like Alice in Wonderland and The Wizard of Oz, and a lot of things that seemed to be slipped into the movie that were pointing at that basically the movie was all about mind control and how we are everyone is manipulated by it, including the Scientologist Tom Cruise is the star of the movie.
Yes, and touching on the idea of secret societies and strange sexual rituals and even weaving in the idea that the Nicole Kidman character in the movie was a mind control victim herself at some point in time. But
it seemed like that. Her character, a lot of this is coming back to me what I wrote about, but she had a lot of different personalities. She'd switch from one to another, and at least according to the mind control literature, that's what happens with a lot of these victims of MK Ultra. Through trauma, different altered personalities are created. Much like Sybil, if you remember that movie, and way back when that. These traumas cause them to split off into different personalities so they can basically get away from the traumatized personality. So with Nicole Kidman's character, I saw several different personalities, and there's like scenes when she was staring into a mirror. That's pretty common with, at least once again, according to the literature, how they go in from one altered state to another by staring into a mirror. There was a lot of masks used throughout the movie to hide personalities and change personalities. A lot of the basically the people involved in the sex magic rituals were masked and their identities were hidden. So there seemed to me a lot of allusions to the monarch mind control programming throughout the movie. Not long afterwards, indeed, Stanley Kubrick did die, and a lot of people pointed to some type of conspiracy that he, was revealing too much too soon. The whole revelation of the method thing, he was bringing it along too fast, that he was some type of insider. William Cooper, the late great conspiracy theorist, had a whole series of audio recordings he did on his old Hour of the Time shortwave radio show, and it was this whole series dedicated to Mystery Babylon, the mystery religions, which became the Illuminati, as he presented the theory. And his first episode dealt specifically with Kubrick's 2001 and all of the Freemasonic imagery in that movie, and how that was really what Kubrick was laying out there was the whole foundation of how Freemasonry is running the world. Now, I'm not saying I necessarily believe or disbelieve in all this, but it's like that with a lot of these conspiracy theories. When you jump down a rabbit hole and start pursuing one certain angle, a lot of those you're able to connect a lot of dots, and synchronicities start to happen, and things come your way. You could go down numerous rabbit holes with contrary theories, and I think it's just a matter, we were talking about paranoia being a higher form of awareness. When you start looking for certain things and tune your brain to certain wavelengths,
I agree. I agree completely.
Seem to come your way.
Yeah, and of course, through work of other researchers, there is a very strong, connection between Masonry and the whole Apollo program, including, the sites where they decided to, set down, and the times of the launch of the rockets and things like this. That does sort of support the idea that there is a kind of like a Freemasonic connection there. And if I'm not mistaken, some other researchers have pointed out that a lot of the people that work at NASA are Masons. So
Downard is on to this early, and I think he was one of the first person to pick up on that. I talked about that Sirius Rising audio series he did with William Grimstead. He was talking about a lot of this stuff, and he pointed out how Neil Armstrong was a 33rd degree Mason who basically conquered the moon for Freemasonry. And a lot of this stuff, Richard Hoagland has talked about it in recent years, but he got a lot of that from James Shelby Downard. So Downard is out there, but he was picking up on stuff.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. I think that it's probably part of my fascination with kooky people like Downard, and we did a podcast on Francis Deck, who was another amazing kook, amazingly productive person over the years in the later part of the 20th century. Part of the fascination I have with these people is that when you look at what they produce, it's like you said, the idea that the paranoid is a higher level of awareness. It kind of makes you realize that with all things, even the most bizarre, there is some sort of grain of truth behind it. There's something underlying it that gives it the impetus to move in that direction.
And, perhaps all of these weird things are true to some extent, and all these, they're different threads of reality that are moving parallel. That's what paranormal means, or parapolitics. It's these alternate scenarios or things going on that are running parallel to our everyday lives, where we're not really aware of them. And if just consider, the possibility that there are all these alternate realities going on, and they're all true at some level. And if you're somebody who's quote-unquote paranoid and you're tuning into all of these things that coexist and seemingly are in conflict with one another but are all true, wouldn't that drive you crazy?
I would think so. I would think so, yeah. I'm a big fan of H.P. Lovecraft, and one of his most famous quotes that people point to is from, I believe, The Call of Cthulhu, which I can't remember it exactly, but he said basically that the best thing in the world is that people don't know what's really true, because we're better off living in our little island of ignorance here rather than knowing what the true nature of reality is outside of our, limited thought processes.
Yeah, and I have to tune out some of the craziness sometimes, especially in this day and age where there's so much noise coming at you from so many different directions. Sometimes you got to step back and, I don't know, maybe take a walk in the woods and retreat to nature just to get your sanity or meditate or whatever it takes.
Right.
It's a noisy world we live in.
Oh my goodness, I couldn't agree more. Especially, we just had the shooting of the congresswoman and the judge by another guy with 3 names. I'm gonna dub that mind control program Lee, because here's another guy. His middle name is Lee. And all these assassins all have 3 names, and 3 is of course an important number, not only in Freemasonry but in a lot of religions as well. And it's just every day you could be completely inundated by both the facts of the world and what you see behind those facts, and I couldn't agree more. You gotta step back every once in a while and just take a breath. Otherwise, you'll end up driving down the highway in a Winnebago with a 45 by your side, like James Shelby Downard, I'm sure. So let's take a minute here. Let me ask you what you're up to right now, and are you working on any projects or thinking about moving in any new directions?
I'm working on a lot of things. Some I can talk about, some I can't talk about. Probably about half a dozen book projects in the works, if you believe that. A lot of it, the material revolves around the Discordian Society. One of the books will be a history of the Discordian Society.
Mm-hmm.
And it's basically, I was passed on a lot of material, Discordian artifacts that I don't know how familiar you are with the Discordian Society and the history of it.
Well, obviously, I know Thornley, Kerry Thornley, who you wrote a book about, The Prankster and the Conspiracy. I know he was involved in the development of it, and I have that book. I wanted to have it in front of me so that I could refer to it, because I did want to get into that the topic of Thornley, since you mentioned it right now. And I also, I'm familiar with Robert Anton Wilson and his work with the Illuminatus books, which have a connection with Discordianism.
Yeah. So materials in that vein, as well as working on a book dealing with Thornley and the Kennedy assassination. I came across a lot more materials. I wrote about that a bit in the Prankster, but I'm going to basically take in all the additional material that was passed on to me, and I think this will evolve into a book on Thornley and Oswald and the Kennedy assassination. Then several. There's a number of things. They're kind of in the gestation period, and I don't want to talk too much about them. I'm kind of superstitious. I'm working on a couple film projects. One of them I talked about seeing Nick Redfern a couple weeks ago. One deals with we interviewed a bunch of researchers into paranormal and conspiracies out here in California. So the theme of the movie is basically talking to these different researchers and going to some of the more strange and mysterious locales in the Golden State of California, kind of a weird California type of film with, we have Mr. N and Andy Colvin, who I believe you're going to interview. I was checking out your website.
I have an interview scheduled with him,
and a number of other researchers. So we just finished filming it's about a month ago, so I think this will I worked kind of as the producer of the movie, and it's being directed by an Australian guy named Sam Fielder, and he's back in Australia now, taking the 30 hours of film we shot and trying to boil that down into a 90-minute film. The working title, I think, right now is Parafornia.
Ah, that's a great name. I like it. I like it very much.
It's, it's all, a lot of it's in the editing is the real challenge of pulling this stuff together, so it's kind of out of my hands at this point. So there's that movie project, and I also produced the soundtrack for a film that Sam's working on called The New Prophet, which is a feature film movie dealing with the occult and the paranormal, kind of a science fiction type film. And so, I got a lot of things going on these days.
Go ahead.
Probably within the next year and a half, you'll see different books coming out.
Good.
With my
good.
name.
Well, good. I'm glad to hear it. I enjoy your work, so I look forward to seeing anything new you have coming out. And you also not too long ago came out with a CD, Transmissions from a Dying Planet.
Yes.
Could you talk about that a little bit, maybe? Tell us how that came together.
That is basically the soundtrack to the New Prophet movie that I was talking about, this sci-fi thing. And you can, if you go on to YouTube, if you put in the New Prophet and Sam Fielder, you can come up with a couple of trailers. The disclaimer there is that he hasn't put my music to the film yet, so...
So I can't listen to your music when I look at the trailers.
Right.
Basically, that's what it boils down to.
Yeah, pretty soon we'll have a trailer out with my music to it, and so that is what's basically on the CD, plus a couple of other songs as well. It's the soundtrack to the New Prophet.
Very good. Is that going to be a theatrical release or straight to DVD or what?
Well, he's an independent filmmaker, so he's figuring out this stuff. It's going to be the same thing with the Parafornia movie. We'll be looking at, entering it into festivals and trying to find a distributor for it, so it's a work in progress. It's not obviously, it's a small independent film, so it's not going to be a major release, but hopefully, we'll catch lightning in a bottle, and
Hey, you got to do what you got to do, So I'll look forward to them. I'll keep my eye out for them, and
I'll keep you in the loop.
Yeah, please do. I'd appreciate it. Okay, so that's what you got going on your plate right now. Since you brought up Discordianism, maybe we could waltz on over to Carrie Thornley, and you could talk a little bit about the prankster and the conspiracy, and give us a little background in that area.
I guess the best place to start is with Carrie Thornley himself. He was born in Whittier, California in the late 30s, and so in the late 50s, when he was mid to late 50s as a teen, he helped cook up this spook religion, Discordianism, with his friend Greg Hill, and it was kind of a philosophical exercise with them. Basically, they had a lot of philosophical discussions during those days. They'd go to a bowling alley and talk about a whole wide range of the subject, and somehow this spoof religion evolved called Discordianism, which was basically their way of poking fun at organized religion. And so in the late 50s, it was an in-joke between Kerry Thornley, Greg Hill, and a few other of their. So anyway, that's the first thing you can note about Kerry Thornley. After high school, while in high school, he'd been in the Marine Corps Reserves. So after he graduated high school, he went to the University of Southern California for a year studying journalism, decided he wasn't cut out for the college life, and decided to fulfill his active 2-year duty. Also, he was a budding writer, so he wanted to go out, experience the world. And so he enlisted in the Marines, and he was first stationed at El Toro Marine Base there in Southern California, where his path crossed with none other than Lee Harvey Oswald.
Mm-hmm.
Oswald at that time had just returned from overseas duty. He was in Atsugi Air Base in Japan, where he was a radar technician. And so at El Toro, anyway, one of the things about Oswald, when he came back, he kind of had this aura about him as a malcontent, rebellious type character. He came back with the rank of private, which was kind of odd that most people that came back from overseas duty were at least a corporal. He had gotten into trouble apparently over there, and anyway, came back with this cloud hanging over his head, and he and Thornley, over a 3-month period, became friends there, and they had a lot of conversations about politics and philosophy, and Thornley found Oswald a pretty interesting character. So after that 3-month period, Thornley was shipped overseas to Atsugi Air Base in Japan, where Oswald had formerly been, and he started writing a book about a work of fiction, a novel during that period called Idle Warriors, which was about basically serving in the military services during the Cold War period and the general melees that these idle warriors experienced. It was kind of an odd period. And so the main character of that book was a Marine named Johnny Shelburne, who was based on Thornley and a bunch of other Marines he had known, including Lee Harvey Oswald. So during the period Thornley was over in Japan, Oswald defected, and at that point the focus shifted in Idle Warriors, and Oswald, the character of Johnny Shelburne, became primarily based on Lee Harvey Oswald. So that was kind of the first oddity, or another oddity regarding Thornley's life, that he was writing a book about Lee Harvey Oswald 3 years before the Kennedy assassination.
Yeah, like who ever heard of Lee Harvey Oswald prior to the Kennedy assassination, and here he was, not only stationed in the same place with him, becoming friends with him, and writing a book, ostensibly with him as the main character of the book. It's a pretty bizarre story, just right up to that point, but it even gets stranger, does it not?
It continues to get stranger, and God, this given the background, we could take the rest of the show, but maybe some highlights.
Yes.
Thornley ended up at Atsugi as a radar technician, just
I think
as
maybe we
Oswald
should take a moment to mention that Atsugi was one of the bases where they flew the U-2 spy plane out of. Is that not correct?
That is correct, and during the period Oswald was there, it was the same period that Gary Francis Powers was flying missions out of Atsugi, and Powers was the guy, remember, who got shot down over Soviet territory, and Powers claimed, he was taken by the Russians and later released, but he claimed it was because Oswald had, shared secrets with the Soviets after he defected was the reason that he got shot down. And, as I looked into this story, Thornley later claimed that he suspected he'd been a mind control victim and that Oswald had been a mind control victim, and that even Thornley suspected that he had been a second in line patsy if the Oswald frame-up hadn't worked out. At Atsugi, it later came out, and this was an article in Rolling Stone magazine, I think in the late 70s or 80s, that they had an MK-Ultra program going there. And that also a guy named E. Howard Hunt, a famous intelligence agency spook, had served at Atsugi during the same time period that Oswald and Kerry Thornley had been there.
Huh, I'd never heard that one before.
Yeah, I believe I got into that in the book. I mean, there's a lot of details in the book. So after Thornley got out of the Marines, this was in the early 60s, he moved to New Orleans. Once again, he was a budding writer, wanted to get out there and experience the world. And he met some interesting characters there in New Orleans, and one of them was had the name of Gary Kirsten. And with this Kirsten character, who apparently had claimed to have connections with the intelligence agencies, he'd served in naval intelligence, and connections to the mob and the underworld in New Orleans. He and Thornley had a lot of conversations, once again, like with Oswald, politics and philosophy, and at one point a conversation ensued about how to kill a president. It's kind of a theoretical, albeit morbid exercise, how to kill a president, and in particular John F. Kennedy. Now, they went into some detail on this, and later, these conversations came back to haunt Thornley. About a decade later, Thornley, we just jumped over a significant period, the Jim Garrison investigation. Let's go there first before we go into the mid-70s. Sure. So that was in the leading up to the Kennedy assassination. Thornley was in New Orleans when the Kennedy assassination happened in 1963. During the same time period that Thornley was in New Orleans, Lee Harvey Oswald was also in New Orleans, and Thornley claimed that they had no contact during that period. In 1967, Jim Garrison came out with his investigation. Jim Garrison, of course, was the New Orleans DA, and his whole saga was chronicled in the movie JFK by Oliver Stone,
yes,
which dealt with this cabal in New Orleans made up of rogue intelligence and like paramilitary type guys that were kind of connected to the pigs thing, that they engineered the JFK assassination conspiracy. And so, Garrison contended, and Garrison was on the right track, that Oswald had been part of this bunch or been manipulated by Guy Bannister and Clay Shaw and this whole bunch of rogue intelligence agents that were involved in engineering the JFK assassination. So Garrison began his investigation and indicted the likes of Clay Shawn. He also indicted Kerry Thornley as part of this nexus of people involved in this assassination conspiracy, claiming that Thornley had been one of the notorious Oswald doubles that were running around portraying Oswald prior to the assassination to basically paint the picture of him as a lone nut, wacko, communist sympathizer. Eventually, Garrison claimed that his investigation was undermined by elements of the CIA and all these type of things, so his investigation got derailed and fell apart. So all of that was going on throughout the whole period. Thornley was saying, this is a bunch of crap. I'd never met Oswald. There was witnesses that came forward that claimed they saw Thornley and Oswald together during this period. And so we progress into the early 70s. Thornley comes across a book that's called Coup d'Etat in America, which is an acronym for the CIA by a couple guys named Weberman and Canfield, who contended that the three hobos that were picked up in Daley Plaza, you remember those guys?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yes. Mm-hmm.
That they were actually guys who were intelligence agents who were involved in Bay of Pigs and also Watergate.
Frank Sturgis and E. Howard Hunt were supposedly two of them, correct?
Yeah, those are the ones they identified, and they took the photos of the three tramps, and they also took, in the original book, which I still have, there's these photographic overlays that you can place over the pictures of the tramps, overlays of Sturgis and Hunt, and they match up pretty identically, their ears and everything, and it, at least from that book, it appears that, yeah, Sturgis and Hunt were a couple of the tramps. Hunt was the old man tramp. And so anyway, Thornley came across this material in the early 70s and went, whoa. The guy, he wasn't familiar with E. Howard Hunt up to that point. He goes, that's the guy that I had those conversations with in New Orleans in the early 60s about how to assassinate a president. That this guy, the guy he talked to, Gary Kirsten, was indeed E. Howard Hunt. And once he came to that realization, all these memories started flooding back that he had been some type of MK Ultra or mind control victim, that he and Oswald had been set up.
So he, considering the background and the fact that he came to this realization after being through all the things that he had been through, I imagine that must have been pretty mind-shattering for him to realize that, he was very close to being involved in the most notorious crime of all time, at least up until that point.
And according to the people I talked to, he kind of got derailed himself there in the late 70s and went off the deep end for a while, and was some people described him as became paranoid schizophrenic. But I think if you were set up for to be like a patsy in the crime of the century, that would drive a lot of us crazy.
Oh, I'm sure it would definitely have a disastrous effect on you to realize, how close you were to something that you just had absolutely no idea about. And I mentioned earlier about how Robert Anton Wilson and the Illuminatus, incorporates Discordianism, and he had some connection with Thornley, did he not? I believe Thornley, in his at least at some point later in his life, claimed that Robert Anton Wilson was a CIA agent or something to that effect.
Yeah, that's what he suspected. I write about that. And actually, Wilson, he wrote the intro to the Prankster and the Conspiracy. He talks about that period where Thornley basically went off the deep end, it would appear, and that he suspected that the likes of Robert Anton Wilson and other people that were his friends were plotting against him and were part of this conspiracy. And, that's, strangely enough, that's what Jim Garrison suspected when he was investigating Thornley. He came across some of the Discordian materials, and he jumped to the conclusion that the Discordian Society was a CIA front.
Would be. It's funny to think about, though. I mean, it's certainly one of the more bizarre aspects to the Kennedy assassination, which has no end of bizarrerie around it. That's for sure.
And Thornley started playing along with him for a while. This is back during the time of the investigation. Garrison had an investigator by the name of Alan Chapman who believed that the Illuminati was involved in the Kennedy assassination. So Kerry and some of his friends, including Robert Anton Wilson and some others, started writing these kind of fake letters they were sending out to the media that where they're claiming indeed they were the Bavarian Illuminati, and the Discordian Society was connected to the Bavarian Illuminati, and that they'd been involved behind all the major conspiracies. So that makes this story just so much crazier. Oddly enough, it's one of those things. It's a rabbit hole. There's a Bible to Discordian. It's called the Principia Discordia, and the first edition was written during the period that Thornley and his buddy Greg Hill were living in New Orleans. And Greg Hill, the co-founder of Discordianism, his girlfriend worked in Garrison's office, and they actually printed off the first 5 editions of the Principia Discordia in Garrison's office after hours on his mimeograph machine. So Garrison, that's true, and so Garrison as well was involved in this Discordian Illuminati conspiracy, whether he knew it or not.
That's a funny anecdote to the side that the something that he claimed was a CIA front thing was actually having its principal publication being run off on his mimeograph machine in his office when he wasn't there. So, like I said, there's just so much bizarre aspects to Kennedy assassination and Jim Garrison's investigation. One
more interesting thing. You would think I was making all this shit up, but I'm not.
I don't think you're making it up. Believe me.
The principal witness against Thornley was a lady by the name of Barbara Reed, and she was like a bohemian scene maker. And if you look in the history of New Orleans, she was heavily involved in the jazz scene back then, but she was also involved in all kinds of stuff. She was kind of involved in voodoo, and she was known as a witch in the French Quarter. But the principal witness of Kerry Thornley was also good friends with Kerry Thornley and his friend Greg Hill. Greg Hill, I think, dated Barbara Reed for a while, and Barbara Reed was one of the first members of the Discordian Society. And so what they would do for the early members of the Discordian Society, Greg Hill would make very elaborate embossed certificates, and he made one for Barbara Reed. Later, this material, as well as like photocopies of that first edition of the Principia Discordia, ended up in Jim Garrison's material from his investigation. These came out as Freedom of Information documents as well, So I think how Garrison got a hold of the Principia Discordia, and it became part of his investigation material. Barbara Reed gave it to him because among those materials also you'll see Barbara Reed's Discordian Society certificate. And so that's why Garrison was looking over all this stuff. He was basically saying that Thornley was part of a group of CIA agents involved in the Kennedy assassination, and Thornley was involved with the Discordian Society, so he connected the dots as they made sense to him, and that's why Garrison thought that the Discordian Society was some type of CIA front for Thornley's activities related to the Kennedy assassination.
I guess probably Thornley himself probably came to believe that if that wasn't the case, then maybe it was also being set up to be that way.
Well, yeah, he did. He did, yeah.
That he was being used even in the construction of the thing that he was one of the principal agents in bringing forward, I imagine.
He was he and Greg were the major players in that, but later when he really started getting paranoid, he was thinking, he was seeing a conspiracy behind everything, and that he'd been manipulated into creating the Discordian Society, a spoof religion.
Yes,
because it was part of some greater design. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, like you said earlier, I mean, you got to entertain the idea that there's some factual basis behind all of that. I mean, when you look at the Kennedy assassination, and you look at Oswald, and you look at all the strangeness around him, and all the different books and theories that have been put forward, about him having, some kind of surgery done while he was in Minsk in Russia, which supposedly implanted him with some kind of device, and there's a very strong mind control angle behind it. I think Lincoln Lawrence went into that in Where We Controlled, and I guess it'd be very easy for Thornley being close to things like that, and realizing later that he had E. Howard Hunt talking to him about how to kill the president, in like a coffee shop or whatever it was, and I could imagine myself in that situation thinking, what possibly could have been waiting for me, or had been planned for me had Oswald not come through the way they planned it to. Yeah, it's just really bizarre.
Something just dawned on me. This is interesting realization. Thornley claimed that, it was Barbara Reed who claimed that she saw Thornley and Oswald together at a restaurant called the Bourbon House at the time. And afterwards, Thornley claimed he didn't remember meeting Oswald there. He couldn't remember exactly who it was. But there's a lot of people have done some research in recent years, suggest there was a different Oswald that came back from Russia. There's a book called Lee and Harvey by a researcher named John Armstrong. He shows the different photos of Oswald over the years, and it looks like there was indeed two different Oswalds. Pretty fascinating. And perhaps if there was a different Oswald that came back from Russia, that would explain why Thornley didn't recognize Oswald at the Bourbon House restaurant.
If in fact he actually did meet him there.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, according to Barbara Reed, yeah. And I'm familiar with the two Oswald theory. I mean, there were some people that pointed out discrepancies even a long time ago about, Oswald being inducted into the military at a certain height and then being a different height later, after the assassination and what have you, which caused some, was it just a clerical error or, and maybe there was
his own mother claimed that it wasn't Lee buried in his grave; it was somebody else.
Which, and like I said, it's just, the whole thing surrounding that. I mean, Carrie Thornley is a character, being involved in that and having that prior experience with Oswald and in the Marines and everything like that. Just, it's just a really, if somebody didn't really try to take the time to look at all of the threads that go out and try to make some connections between them, there would be so much of history would be just completely unknown to people. And even looking at it from a parapolitical point of view, there are people that have particular views on who was behind the assassination and who wasn't. And, like other dogmatic positions, they hold rigidly to their points of view. Some of the researchers do anyway. And but looking at the other aspects and realize that like with 9/11 too, I think there are two perfect examples of the kind of thing that the powers that be, if you want to call them that, the people working behind the scenes, what they do with any particular case that is really, really big like this, they just flood so much information out there that you could make a case for just about anybody killing Kennedy or just about anybody being behind 9/11. I mean, you could have evidence for it too. That's the thing that's the kicker. I mean, there's so many things put out that you could really, I mean, you could make the case for anything. And I think that's part of the overall strategy for people that orchestrate these kinds of things, that if it's something particularly massive and traumatic, like the killing of the president, in broad daylight, driving down a street, or 9/11, the destruction of the World Trade Center towers, that in order to cover up the truth, they give you too much information and point the fingers in too many different directions. You can't possibly ever know the truth, and that's really what that's my bottom line on the Kennedy assassination. You're never going to have an answer. It's never going to be satisfactory. It's never going to solve it completely, no matter what kind of information comes out.
Yeah, the Kennedy assassination was really the first big conspiracy I got interested in and started reading the books, and initially I was just pissed off. It was outraged, he was killed like a dog in the streets, for everybody to see, and there was an obvious conspiracy behind it. And as you got deeper into the thing, it was exactly like you said, you had all these competing conspiracies, and they all made sense, and there were different players involved and overlapping players to the point where you were so confused that finally you have to step back and say, yeah, he was assassinated by a conspiracy, but it's been so muddied at this point we'll never get at the bottom of it.
Exactly, and that's kind of where my research ended, because you could just keep going on and on forever, and like you said, every one of them is plausible. I've not seen a decent book or a decent theory put forward by someone, not talking about just the ramblings of some crazy person, even though that might have some validity too.
Yeah,
but But looking at them, even glossing over them, you can see that they have evidence, they have support, and if that's the case for everything, then you can't ever come to any conclusions. So
well, it's like E. Howard Hunt. His name comes up time and again. He made a deathbed confession, and it seems like he was involved at some level. But was he just a low-level player? Was he what a high-level player? Was where exactly does he fit into the puzzle with all the other players from the French Mafia and the Italian Mafia and the CIA and LBJ and yeah.
Yep, you could just go on and on forever. You probably get tired of talking about the Manson family after all this time with your book being out, but I wanted to ask you something about that. But before I do, I just want to note that we're here on 1/11/11, and we passed through our 11:11 p.m. here on the East Coast. I assume you're out on the West Coast?
Yes.
So we just had our 1/11/11/11/11, and I wondered if you had any thoughts on the recurrent theme of 11:11 or 1/11 or the idea of these symbolic numbers.
No. I have, I've heard there's something to the 11111, but there's so many things nowadays. It's like it's something I didn't really look too deeply into. I don't know what the significance is. It's kind of like similar to that magic date in 2012, or something's supposed to happen, or I don't. Andy Colvin is somebody you talk about regarding this phenomenon.
Yeah,
he's all over it.
Well, I call Andy the. Go ahead.
I have no insights into the relevance of all this 11/11 stuff, but yeah, Andy is some type of shaman.
I like to refer to Andy Colvin as like our generation's Charles Fort, because he's just a vacuum of knowledge. He sucks everything up.
Yeah.
So I definitely enjoy the stuff that he puts out, and so I'm looking forward to talking to him in the future. But I just thought I'd throw that one out there. But
what's the deal with this 11/11?
Well, the idea, I don't know. I think it's like a synchronicity kind of thing with the 11/11, because I have a friend of mine who frequently tells me that he every time he looks at the clock, it's 11/11. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you see the 11/11 symbology represent a lot of other different ways, and I hear those kind of stories from people, and I think it has to do with sort of like a synchronistic kind of thing. Myself, I don't know. It's kind of like with words and numbers. I think that there's a certain kind of like power in them. There's a certain kind of like I don't know whether it has to do with like a projection of your consciousness or whatever that we put into words and numbers, that they have like a direct effect on your consciousness in a certain way, because they represent concepts that are sometimes so involved and deep that it's just a word, but yet it am I making sense? It kind of like has a...
Exactly, and I was talking about different materials that were passed on to me, and some of this stuff is Robert Anton Wilson-related materials.
Mm-hmm.
And in one place he wrote about the 23 Enigma.
Oh,
yeah.
And
basically, he admitted, I don't think he ever admitted this publicly, but that was basically they were floating a balloon out there to see if this would take off, this whole 23 thing, if they started talking about it and people would start looking for it and it would show up in odd places. And exactly what you're describing as a thought projection is what Wilson, I think he believed what the whole 23 Enigma was about, that people invested a certain amount of energy into the number, or that it had some mystical significance, and then the more people look for something, the more that they become aware and see it. It's like, I don't know if this is a good analogy, because I think the Beatles were actually hiding a bunch of weird stuff and messages, but that could be one explanation for all the whole Paul is dead thing, is that people started looking for stuff and things started appearing. Actually, I think the Beatles were planning stuff, but with the whole number 23 Enigma, I think it was something that Discordians threw out there to see if people would pick up and run with and invest it with its own power. And perhaps that's, like you said, what's happening with the 1111 thing. Consciousness is a powerful tool, especially if a number of people, there's strength in numbers, are focusing their thoughts on a particular object or number or whatever.
Yeah, I believe that, and I think there's a strong sense of that. It'll be very interesting to hear that the 23 Enigma was something that was like sort of projected into society, and it sort of became its own self-perpetuating thing. It's kind of fascinating, really, when you think about it. I mean, it even came to have its own movie with the number 23 with who was in that, James Carey? Yeah. Which is a really bizarre movie.
Look for a future book by Adam Gorightly that will address this topic.
All right, very good. I'll definitely look forward to it. I'll definitely look forward.
That's one of the things. You've been around the world of the paranormal, conspiracy theories, and predictions, and these type of things. It's like, here's another whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
After a while, it looks like the 2012 thing. Yeah, right. If anyone wants to put some money on that, I'll take them out.
Oh, yeah. I'll throw in the pool with you, because I think that's a bunch of nonsense. Yeah,
of course, you can't lose if the world does end on 2012. Then whatever.
That's true, but you don't have to tell them that. They let them figure it out afterwards.
Right.
If we stand to gain some money on it, I'll definitely throw in the pool with you, because I think that's nonsense, really. But anyway, we get off on that little sidetrack there. I did want to ask you your thoughts. Go ahead.
I was just going to say before we move on. On the other hand, if people invest enough consciousness and thought into something, then maybe they could make that happen, whatever that would be.
Well, that's sort of the basis of ritual magic. I mean, and even sex magic, for that matter. It's investing a certain amount of energy. It's investing a certain amount of your own self into whatever it is you want to create, and obviously that involves words and numbers and that sort of thing, because obviously that's the way you convey from your mind to whatever the idea that you're trying to do. So I mean, that's underlying basis for that entire, ritualistic system. So you can't, I mean, you have to acknowledge that's a real thing there, at least from that point of view, anyway. But anyway, I did want to ask you your thoughts on Roman Polanski and the fact that after all these years he had been arrested last year and put through the process of trying to get him extradited back to the United States for raping a girl. I can't remember her name right now, but I wanted to get your thoughts on that, especially in light of the fact that it happened around the same time that one of the Manson family was released from prison, and I can't remember who it was right now, but they happened like in close proximity to each other. His arrest.
Well, you're probably talking about Squeaky Fromm got released.
Maybe, I believe that's I believe that's who it was, because I did a video about it on YouTube. If you want to check out my channel on YouTube, I go by the name Tenebrous T, which is TENEBROUST. Most of my videos are political rants where I scream and curse a lot. So if you ever feel in the mood to hear somebody ranting and using excessive profanity, stop by. But occasionally I do things. Occasionally I do things that touch on the occult or paranormal or something like that. But I did a video about that, and I thought it was kind of odd that after all those years he was finally arrested, and they attempted extradition. Of course, they turned him down, so he's loose again. And I wondered if you had any thoughts about that.
Well, let's get back to Roman in a minute, but I think we should talk about Squeaky Fromm, because she wasn't part of the Manson family murder. She attempted to assassinate Gerald Ford back in '74, and this is something Andy Colvin, he's looked into the connections with Squeaky Fromm, Charles Manson, and Sarah Jane Moore was the other person who attempted to assassinate Ford. Sarah Jane Moore wasn't a Manson family member, but apparently knew Charles Manson growing up in West Virginia, and Andy Colvin was one of the first people to start looking into this, which is kind of a pretty weird coincidence, synchronicity, conspiracy that the two women that both attempted to assassinate Gerald Ford knew Charles Manson. Don't you think that's kind of odd?
Yes, I do. It's odd in the sense that they would have that particular connection, and I think I don't remember who it was. It might have been Sarah Jane Moore, and I can't remember where I saw this at, but I think someone had alleged that Charles Manson had made a trip to West Virginia to supposedly handle some business, accompanied by a woman that might have been Sarah Jane Moore. Does that ring a bell with you at all?
No, it doesn't.
Okay, I might be wrong about that. So, but it seems to me that I recall reading that somewhere that Charles Manson had made a cross-country bike trip back to West Virginia.
No, I think you're confusing a couple different things. Manson, well, somebody who fit the description of Manson showed up in Ashland, Kentucky.
Oh, it was Kentucky. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was like 68 during the period of the Manson family, and was allegedly seen with somebody who fit the description of Susan Atkins, one of the other Manson family murders. And so this guy who called himself the preacher, who was riding around on a motorcycle, was trying to start a kind of commune or something, and was turning some of the teenage kids onto acid and
you're breaking up a little bit. Do you, check your mic connection, or
how do I sound now?
Okay, you sound okay right now. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I was probably just moving around a bit. So this guy named the Preacher showed up in Kentucky during this period, it was around 68 or so. And he fit the description of Charles Manson, turning on the local kids to acid like he was trying to start his own little cult or commune. During that same period, a guy named Darwin Scott was brutally murdered. Darwin Scott, and this was also in Ashland, Kentucky, Darwin Scott happened to be the brother of Charles Manson's father, who was named Colonel Scott. So that's one of those odd Manson family stories about unexplained murders or deaths that seem connected to the Manson family.
Yeah, it sounds like maybe I did get that mixed up a little bit there.
Now, back to Roman Polanski, like you said, it does seem odd that it's the revelation of the method. They do this to mess with us somehow, that Squeaky Fromm's release and, trying to extradite Polanski back to the U.S. seems more than a coincidence. Might, if you want my opinion on Polanski or whatever, it's kind of hard to. I have mixed sympathies. I mean, if he did what it appears he did, then he should come back and, pay the piper. But I don't know. I also feel sympathetic for somebody who's gone through all he has and is an old man. I don't know.
Well,
it's
yeah,
not easy. I wouldn't want to be a judge.
Oh well, yeah, I can agree with that more too. Certainly, it's easy to come down on either side in that particular point of view, because obviously he did go through a pretty horrendous ordeal with with his wife being murdered, and but like you said, if he's guilty of what he's supposedly guilty of, then it's obviously a price to be paid for that. But there's a lot of those underground stories about Polanski and his involvement with certain other things as well. So
yeah,
which make him a rather potentially very culpable person. Let's just put it that way. And I know you're familiar with all of those stories. So it's sort of like on the one hand you can be sympathetic, but on the other it's like it may be just another cog in that big wheel going around. So I just thought it was kind of odd that both of those were happening in such close proximity to each other, and it just seemed odd that after all those years, somebody finally decided to take some action to try to get him extradited back here. And I think maybe it was just like a revelation of the method kind of thing, just to say, hey, look, we're doing something here. Look over here for a second, and then somebody waves their magic wand over on the other side, and you miss them doing something that they did over there because you were looking at that.
Yeah, Sarah Jane Moore and Squeaky Fromm both were released within a year of each other, too, I should note.
Yeah, and Sarah Jane Moore, I don't know about Squeaky Fromm. Has anybody heard anything about her? Has she come out, or has she spoken to anybody or talked?
Not exactly. About a few months ago, a story came out. Somebody saw her, a news crew, caught wind that she was at a Walmart, of all places. She's in upstate New York somewhere, and filmed her coming out of the Walmart, and there was like a scene, and she knocked the camera, out of the cameraman's hand. And she was driving with her boyfriend. They had a VW, one of those old VW hippie vans, and the bumper sticker on the back bumper said "Born Again Pagan," and they identified where she was living at, and it was like in this old reconstituted Quonset hut, kind of living, the hippie pagan existence. So she was kind of outed, and they basically, the news crew there said, listed what her address was, and that story came out about a month ago. So she's trying to stay under the radar, but she's in upstate New York somewhere, unless she's moved since that episode.
So she's still living the dream, huh? With the hippie commune thing, she's still embracing that whole deal, huh?
well, why not?
I guess it's like, maybe the kind of supposed hold that Manson had over all of his acolytes, is so ingrained that they just have to keep going on with the archetype that they're working under.
She was one of her and Sandra Good were the diehards, and I think Manson finally got to the point where he realized that he wasn't. It wasn't worth his while keeping these connections anymore, and he basically cast it off. Sandra Good and Squeaky, but there's living the dream.
The one thing I could say that I think a lot of people miss out on with the Manson thing is here you have Charles Manson, who is really, admittedly, a freaky character on a lot of levels. But here you have a guy who's serving life in prison, who's never going to get out, and I think he wants to stay in, obviously, because the institutional life is, that's practically his whole life. He was in and out of prison ever since he was real young. But here you have a guy serving time for life for murder that he didn't even kill anybody, which is, and it made the career of Vincent Bugliosi, who has gone on to put his hand into the JFK stew as well with his Lee Harvey Oswald lone nut deal. So, and basically kind of making up this whole helter-skelter idea, or at least blowing it up out of proportion as a way to boost his book sales and what have you. So, I mean, there's so much food for thought there. But we're coming up on the end of the show, so I wanted to give you a chance to plug your stuff before we sign off.
Okay, you can go to my website, adamgorightly.com, and all my books are there. If you go to Amazon and put in Adam Gorightly in the search field there, it'll bring up all the books. I also have a blog at gorightly.wordpress.com. And one other thing, we were talking about the shootings that happened in Tucson, Arizona. I meant to mention this earlier. It's interesting that what's the name of the low nut killer there?
Which one?
Lee.
Jared Lee Loeffner.
Yeah, the first reports of Mr. Loeffner described him as a liberal pot smoker.
Oh yes, I remember. And and then you have the media trying to, go with the Sarah Palin right winger stiff kind of stuff. But I Gee, I wish we could go on for another hour, but we're down to like our last few seconds here. So I just wanted to wrap up, and I wanted to thank you for coming on, Adam, and I wanted to invite everybody back to another episode of The Stench of Truth, hopefully this coming Friday. And Adam, will you come back on again, and we can talk some more about some crazy stuff?
Oh, most certainly.
All
Thanks
right,
for having
then.
me on.
Hey, it was a
fun.
great pleasure. Thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you next time. So long, and good night.
Take care.
Bye-bye.